20 years old. She vanished into thin air following a late-night hookup on December 18. Nobody knows what drove her out the door that night. The pad was totally spotless after her rendezvous. Zero clues left behind. Her whole crew and relatives are out combing through multiple counties. Since daybreak, locals are braving the freezing South Carolina chill, hunting via watercraft, four-wheelers, a boot. She was on our payroll over 12 months. We actually leave her slotted on the roster until we get Tojabled, Nieberkrud, and our crew. Her spot stays open if she's seeing this, or the creep who took her. The word is simple. We want our girl back. Just get to the house. None of this makes sense, and we ain't looking to judge or press charges either. Girl, if you catch this broadcast, please roll through or hit our line. We're completely lost out here. Fast forward to 3:37 m. The 20-year-old cell hits a tower deep in the sticks near the Waccamaw River docks. Peachtree Landing, basically a dead end in the middle of nowhere. Pitch black and completely deserted. 60 seconds pass. Her device dials a specific contact thrice back-to-back, getting straight to vote to back. By 3:41, she rings them again. Silence 1 minute after that. The mobile goes totally dead. Right then, street cams catch a blacked-out Ford F-150 rolling down that exact same sketchy. Driving that rig, the dude she was actively trying to ghost, Sidney Moorer, a married guy with 3 kids. 10 minutes drop, and that truck peels out. By sunrise, cops stumble on her ride ditched by the ride. It's sealed tight, minus her mobile bag and ignition clicker. Just like that, the girl is a literal goose. Back up a couple of hours, she was sobbing to a buddy over a call, dropping just one major bombshell. Her ex reached out, claiming he finally ditched his spouse and needed a meet-up. She actually kidnapped. Nobody ever caught her voice past that evening, but honestly, the nightmare kicked off way before the creepy stretch of payment. It all roots back to a fluke encounter at a local diner, sparking a fling which kicked off cute but morphed into a seriously lethal situation in record time. Hold up, guys. Taking a quick breather here. I really want to know where my viewers are kicking back. Let me hit you with a quick question. Drop your hometown and current clock digits in the chat. Appreciate why all shouting out. Throw those details down below, and let's dive back into the madness. Horry County, South Carolina is basically postcard material, and locals swear it's paradise out of. The region is stacked with killer shorelines, with Myrtle acting as the ultimate crown jewel for tourists. You've got it all. Dense backwoods, massive waterways, and tight-knit communities where everybody. 20-year-old Heather was the firstborn of local lifers Terry and Debbie. Her bond with her folks and little sis was tight. Her pop broke it down like this down the road. We were totally thick as thieves, the type of squad that breaks their backs to help one another. She was straight-up daddy's girl, firing off messages to him daily without fail. She always did her own thing. After grabbing her diploma in 2011, she ditched the nest to split rent her ride or died. Griana, Terry and Debbie were totally cool with her spreading her wings. Hustling at 20, she slung drinks at a local joint known as the Tilted Kilt down by the Strip. Concurrently, she was grinding through beauty school to chase her endgame of doing pro cosmetics. Morgan, her younger sibling, spilled on her circles. Cosmetics were her jam. She craved the spotlight and honestly thought the sky was the limit for Huz. Beyond her crazy drive and artistic chops, she was practically local royalty, and everyone vibing her. Folks gravitated to her chill, upbeat aura, a homie mentioned. Just dropping her name makes people grin since she was so electric. Another acquaintance painted a pretty similar picture of her vibe. I'd call her a wild card with a massive heart who just wanted to squeeze every drop out of existence. Kicking off the summer of 2013, she'd already been holding down the coastal flat with Brianna for 12 months. School was a breeze and everything looked like it was finally clicking. Then the script flipped after a random run-in during her shift. The tiny moment lit a fuse that spiraled straight into a fatal nightmare. One sweltering afternoon, she was clocking a crazy lunch rush. Usual grind, grabbing drink tickets, bussing plates, and chewing the fat with patrons, while Holly ran into Sidney, a 37-year-old family man. He ran a small appliance repair gig around the Myrtle Beach area. They got to chatting, and Heather was hooked right from the jump. She hopped on her handle, Moonchild Heather, dropping hints about a fresh flame, posting something on these lines. Older dudes are my vibe. By late July, she was firing off some seriously brazen posts online. They were aimed right at the dude fixing stuff at her gig. She'd point Sydney out to her crew, whispering, "That's the guy I mentioned." Sydney was definitely eating up the attention, popping into the joint way more often, just to shoot the breeze with her. Co-workers constantly caught them in the back, cracking up and flirting whenever he swung by to stew year. Come July, that innocent little crush had likely escalated into something way heavier. The proof was in the pudding, when she dropped 2 tweets 60 seconds apart, basically spelling out they were "idiot. Baby did a bad thing." 60 seconds later, she followed up with, "Might we cross the line?" But she just lost the line. By then, the whole 20-year-old's crew knew she was sweating Sydney, and gossip was spreading wildfire through the staff. A former co-worker later spilled the tea. Everyone knew because they roasted her for it. The guy had a whole wife at Horrit. Folks gave her grief, and some of the girls even threw some serious shade. One shift, 2 workers decided to pull a fast one. They rang up the tilted kilt, playing the role of Tammy, Sydney's old lady. By August, the street talk was practically fact. Sydney kept hovering around the joint constantly, even when he wasn't on the clock. Sometimes he'd slide through with coffee and bagels. Other times, he'd just post up in his ride out back, waiting. After her shift wrapped, they'd bounce. And by then, they weren't exactly keeping their flings from circles anymore. Sydney even told folks he might bring her on as a live-in nanny if he and the wife ever relocated to Florida. Heather fed her crew the same nanny story. Honestly though, nobody was buying it since it was pink eyes that they were definitely hooking up. Those two were glued to their screens, texting non-stop. They'd take separate rides out to the middle of nowhere just to link up in secret. The whole thing was messing with her head. He kept feeding her lines about ditching his unhappy marriage, but never actually pulled the trigger. Her squad kept warning her that this older, married dude was just playing her for a fool. Come mid-September, sneaking around in the shadows was completely draining her spirit. On September 21st, word as she tried to cut the cord, or at least get closure. Her Twitter was the devaway. Once upon a time, an angel and a devil caught feelings. Yeah, that ended like a train wreck. Things turned completely radioactive when his 34-year-old wife, Tammy, caught wind of the side action and rang Heather up to handle business. Her roommate Brianna overheard the whole thing. Tammy dragged her through the mud, claiming Sydney was just using her for a quick thrill. Then, the furious wife made her man get on the line to face the music. Brianna later told the cops Sydney was screaming into the receiver, spitting fire like, "You were nobody, just a cheap piece on the side." Brianna added, "They absolutely crushed her soul to dust, made her feel like pure garbage." Honestly, Tammy and Sydney's marriage looked like a total night from the jump. Prosecutor Chris Helms later told the press, "Tammy wore the pants in that house, hands down. She dictated his whole life, where to clock in, what to do. If I'm calling it, the dude was total wit." Helms pointed out Tammy was seeing red over the cheating, and she definitely wasn't about to tease up out to slay. She was out for blood, ready to wreck Heather entirely. Word on the street is Tammy started shackling the guy to the bedposts at night, so he couldn't see that. She locked down his phone with a secret pin and made him ink her name right down below his beltline. Sydney went along with all this crazy stuff, just hoping to salvage his wreckage of a marriage and keep the family intact. But Brianna said Tammy didn't just drop it after one call. It morphed into a straight-up stalking campaign. She started blowing up Heather's job, trying to get her canned. Brianna recalled the whole mess. Tammy was out of control, hijacking Sydney's device to make the calls. She'd fire off wild, private pics and clips of them together. Heather finally texted the guy, practically into call off his psycho wife. She sent something like, "They sent me home today and docked my pay because she would stop blowing up the phones." Completely shattered by how this dude played her, and straight up terrified of his crazy wife, Heather was finally picking up the pieces, pouring all her energy into getting her mind right again. She even hit up Sunday service with her best girl, Brianna. But come early November, Tammy unloaded a fresh batch of completely threats. Cough up your location now, or I'm gonna find out myself. Believe me, you don't want it going down. Like, I'm giving you one last shot to answer before we meet face to face. Just watch. Another text read, I've had my eyes on Sydney since January 2012. You seriously need to rim my line. Save yourself. Hey, sweetie, you ready to meet the wife? By that point, Heather was totally drained, running on empty from all the nonstop drama. So she just shot back, you are getting way too obsessed with me. I'm straight up not a threat to you more. Heather was clueless why Tammy kept breathing down her neck. Her fling with Sydney was dead and buried, and she just wanted to leave a Merview. By late November, roughly 2 weeks after Tammy's crazy texts, things finally began looking up for our girl. Sydney and Tammy packed up their 3 kids and bounced for a 3-week California road trip, and a road trip, a new Forf 150. With the Moore family out of town, Heather finally caught her breath. For a minute, the relentless sigh of bewilderment from Tammy went totally dead and silent. That was the only win she caught, either. She snagged her ultimate jig doing makeup at a local salon, set to clock in right before the holidays. Heather was riding high. She practically hyped up her new job to anyone who would listen. Still, a dark cloud was hanging over her, a heavy secret that could blow the whole Moore situation wide open. Back in early November, Heather's crew down at the Tilted Kilt started noticing the 20-year on pounds out of nowhere. Panic set in. Heather was terrified she might be carrying Sydney's fey baby. Scared out of her mind, she bit the bullet and grabbed a pregnancy test. She actually took it right in the restaurant bathroom, backed up by her manager, Jessica Cook. Jessica later told the cops Heather was petrified of Tammy, but the stick gave an error reading, leaving Heather completely in the dark about whether she was shock knocked to. Her bestie would later weigh in on that exact moment, confirming Heather took the test right on the clot. It was early November, and she wasn't talking to anybody else. Sydney was the absolute only guy she is sleeping with back then. Even with all that heavy baggage, by the winter of 2013, our eternally optimistic girl decided to turn the page. She was holding out for a fresh spark, someone way less toxic, so she said yes to a first date with a guy she barely knew but caught an instant vibe with. On December 17th, Heather and Steve linked up around 1 in the afternoon, cruising to scope out the holiday lights. Eventually, they parked in an empty lot where Steve gave her a crash course in driving a stick shift. Hyped about it, Heather fired off a text to her pops and Brianna, attaching a selfie of her grinning ear to ear. It read, just learned how to drive manual. I'm basically a pro racer now. Steve later mentioned they both clicked and locked in plans for round 2. After that, he dropped her back at her Carolina forest pad around 1:15 in the morning. Barely at 1:45, Brianna's phone rang with a chilling call. Heather was on the line, totally hysterical and sobbing, trying. Sydney called me. Brianna's heart instantly sank. She was thinking, are we seriously doing this crap again? I straight up asked her why she even picked up. She told me the caller, it was completely random. Heather spilled that Sydney claimed he finally dumped his wife, crying about how sorry he was, and begging to see her. Brianna lost it and snapped. Don't he do this? You are finally past him. You got your groove back? Just go to sleep and let it go for tonight. All right, we can hash this all out tomorrow. After that, the girls traded their goodbyes and killed the call. The very next day, December 19th, local cops got dispatched to check out a sketchy abandoned car. A green Dodge Intrepid, dumped super weirdly in a totally dead zone down by the river known as Peachtree Landing. The area sits roughly 8 miles outside Myrtle Beach near the Walker River. It's basically a rinky rap stuck of a creek deserted dirt road. The ride was locked tight, so the cops ran the plates. A hit instantly popped up in the database. That green Dodge belonged to Terry Elvis, Heather's dad. At that exact second, Terry was kicking back his house, glued to the couch watching TV, right before the cops started banging on his door to drop the news. Totally spooked when Heather's phone went to voicemail. He jumped in the cruiser to uncover what the hell was happening. Terry spotted his daughter's ride dumped in the middle of nowhere. It threw him off, sure, but panic hadn't set in yet. Popping the locks with his backup fob, he let the cops poke around the interior, looking back, that exact sec home back, the way they left it parked. My brain went straight to a joyride situation, figured some punks smited and dished this. Truthfully, the reality hadn't clicked. I wasn't even asking myself where my kid went. It never registered until the badge started tearing through the cab. Once the cops realized her was gone, along with her key ring and mobile missing from that Dodge Intrepid, her old man felt a real bad pit in his stomach. Ringing her line kept sending him straight to voicemail. Desperate, he cruised over the tilted, praying she was clocking a shift. The crew working the floor burst his bubble. She was around, and her next shift wasn't until tomorrow anyway. Right then, the awful truth slapped Terry in the face. My girl doesn't roll like this, he stated flatly. Pulling a disappearing act just isn't her style. Somebody did something. Initially, Horry County boys wearing the badges did lock down Peachtree Landing without shattered windows or spilled blood. Nothing screamed full play. Still, they slapped an active missing person label on it right out the gate. Uniforms and locals, while Sabatines hit the murky Walker River depths. Her crew and blood relatives kicked off a massive, multi-county manhunt by dawn, freezing their L's off, blanketed the South Carolina backwoods. They hit the trails on four-wheelers, hoofed it, saddled up horses, and ran the waters. But all the media heat and heavy police presence, all the blood, sweat, and tears from this community, one to mean a damn thing unless we actually bring her back to her own bed. The 20-year-old girl vanished into thin air following a late-night hookup right around the crack of dawn on December 18th. We got zero clues explaining why she walked out her front door, post-date. Her pad, Wathan, was completely and slightly out of luck. Before everything went sideways, the guy she was seeing helped her figure out a manual suppression some to cram tot. She even found a buddy hyping up the evening. Her pops claimed she fired off a message with a snapshot, proving she was finally behind the wheel working the clutch. I spent ages trying to walk her through the gears, but my temper always got the best of me. She's pulling it off without my help. Honestly, I felt so damn proud. Then the very next morning, she ghosts her shift, and detectives low-key anti-ride bike or dock our backyard. Squeeze your loved ones tight and speak those words out loud, man. Never just guess they understand. Right now, we holding our breath for that one witness to step up. Someone ready to spill the truth about what they noticed, overheard, or hell, what they actually call. The holiday decorations are still standing tall in the living room, surrounded by wrapped gifts with her name on them. Down the line, searchers stumbled upon a corpse practically next door to Peachtree Landing, though the lot isn't confirmed. Those skeletal pieces were a dead end. It was some John Doe running on absolute zero forensic traces. The task force had to painfully backtrack every single between December to the 17th and 18th. They hauled in Steve Girardi to the interrogation room, the dude who took her out right before lot right. Detectives grilled him, but his alibi was rock solid. They cut him loose without putting any heat on him. Listen, Tim, speaking of tight-knit folks, the joint where she made her money was like a second family, and the staff there is bleeding out emotionally every single shift. She is missing from the lineup. She held down a spot on our payroll for over 12 months. We refuse to scrub her off the roster until we get some solid closure. It's a respect thing for the relatives, our neighborhood, and the bar crew. Meanwhile, her inner circle was brushed under the weight of it all, totally gutted by the nightmare. They flooded the internet with raw, tear-jerker posts, practically giving their knees to beg the public for a breadcrumb of truth, throwing cash bounties on the table. But the ink wasn't even dry on the missing posters before Tammy Moe hijacked the web with a straight, venom smear pain. She dropped a massive, unhinged rant on Facebook, kicking off like, since Sydney stepped out on me this past fall with Psycho Chick, who ended up vanishing on December 20th. Then right around that same day, her flatmate Brianna and the Tilted Kilt Squad spilled the tea to the cops about her wild fling with Sydney Moore. The naturally strug ass into the hot seat. Minute one in the box, the guy played it cool and dodged every curveball. Sydney swore up and down's nowhere, and he was nowhere near the 17th or early into the 18th. He stuck to his story, claiming zero connection to the girl, but then he pivoted and threw out a TWBB. He tried selling a story about joyriding in his rig with his wife, Tammy, hooking up in random parking lots. He even bragged they caught the action on their cameras. Seasoned, they could smell the bull from a mile away. They just had to nail down the receipts. Digging into her cellular pings and text logs, the forensics struck absolute gold, cracking the investigation wide open. Piece by piece, the timeline of her last hours came together, shining a harsh spotlight directly on Isto's hands. Way before dawn on December 18th, Heather's cell lit up with a mystery caller. She drew a complete originative end from some random public dial tone. They talked for roughly 5 minutes. Soon as they hung up, she started blowing up that exact line, totally freaking out, kicking off right around 1:35 p.m. She hit redial on that booth 9 separate times. A detective working the case broke it down for us later on. Look, nobody spams an unknown number 9 consecutive times unless they were desperately trying to go hold a hover. Was just on the other end. The girl obviously needed to keep that conversation going. Cops pulled her cellular data and tracked those digits straight to a crusty coin phone outside a Myrtle Beach fill-up station. Security tape caught a shadowy figure picking up that exact receiver right when Heather has phoned. The squad dragged Sydney in, and when they grilled him about dropping that dime, the guy played Graph the dime. You ever try ringing her? Just for a split second? You absolutely positive? All right, man. Let's take it from the top. Yeah, fine. I hit her up. And what exactly went down? I just begged the girl to back off and drop it. They hauled Tammy Moore in next for a sweat session. Sitting in that room, she ran her mouth about but swore up and down. Touch had zero to do with the kid vanishing. Look, you cops just aren't getting the picture. I saw other dudes. We kept things totally open, and that was cool with us. Honestly, he could sleep with 100 chicks an hour. I wouldn't blink an eye. Seriously, whatever, that kind of stuff just doesn't rattle my cage at all. But listen, this chick, just from a stranger's view scrolling her Twitter junk, which I literally never checked, this whole mess blew. The girl's got screws loose, totally off the rails. Back when I was 20, I was out clubbing with all the time. But I never acted trashy like her. Trust me, my crew definitely tried pushing me down that road, but I never that road. Following that wild interview, the task force trusted their gut and started scrubbing every piece of security tape around town. It didn't take long to strike gold. Right before making that shady call, Sydney popped up on video at Walmart, scooping up a home pregnancy kit. When the cops pressed him if the pea stick was for Heather, he shook his head no. The guy insisted he grabbed it for his own wife. The real bombshell dropped when they pulled video from the backwoods route out heading down to Peachtree Landing. At exactly 3:36 a.m. lenses caught a slick, dark Ford F-150, a dead ringer for Sydney's ride, cruising straight toward the spot where they eventually dumped Heather's wheel. Just 10 minutes later, at 3:46 a.m., that identical rig was spotted speeding away from the scene. Down the line, tech specialists swore under oath that the ghost truck on tape was a 100% perfidious pickup. Put simply, this guy was absolutely the final voice she heard on the line, and cops figured he was basically the last breathing soul to catch her alive out by that boat ramp. By ripping the PS off her cell, the squad mapped out every step the kid took before going dark. Around 2:30, her mobile dialed that same crusty coin phone Sydney rang from prior, but nobody picked up. From there, the digital trail drifted over to Longbeard's Tavern out in Carolina Forest, right down the block from her pad. It chilled there for 15 minutes before pinging over to Augusta Plantation Drive. Following that little detour, the signal bounced back to the pub for 15 more minutes. While parked there, she tried hitting Sydney's personal line, but he sent her straight to voicemail. Next up, the tracker showed her slipping back into her apartment, where she hung around for just 5 quick minutes. Fast forward to 3:25 a.m., she rings him again. This round, he actually picks up and they ash it out for roughly 4 minutes. By 3:37 a.m., her device started traveling toward the landing. 60 seconds pass, and she dialed 3 straight times, getting dull radio silence. At 3:41 a.m., she took one final shot at reaching his cell, but struck out again. A minute later, at 3:42 a.m., somebody killed the power on her phone entirely. These pings lined up flawlessly with the video of Sydney's rig rolling down to the water, handing the prosecution a total smoking gun. Things got insanely darker once a judge signed off on a raid for the Moorer property. Get this, on December 20th, the duo mysteriously trashed their entire house security setup, only to wire up a fresh rig on December 21st. With the old hard drives completely missing, cops grabbed the new equipment. That footage caught the life out of the truck's passenger door, literally tossing the dirty rags into a fire pit afterward. All of this sketchy behavior went down the exact same afternoon. They hooked up those fresh cameras. Folks gathered for a candlelight vigil honoring the missing girl. They held it yesterday evening, right at the ramp. That's where cops stumbled on her ditched ride back in December 2013. Her folks dubbed to spill whatever secrets they're holding. Our gut tells us somebody in this town is holding back a massive piece of the puzzle. We're praying they just speak up, regardless of whether it seems totally pointless, or if they're terrified of getting locked up or judged by the neighborhood. Just let it all out. Hopefully folks push past their fear and just spill whatever they've been hiding. Heather's folks are throwing a benefit next week to fix up that local garden down by the landing. They relaying down memorial stones from the drive on June 30th, her actual birthday, all cashed her missing persons center. Then, after months of dead ends, February 2014 hit. Cops finally dropped a bombshell update, giving the whole town the exact break. Everyone was prey one. Nobody on the street was really shocked when handcuffs clicked on Sydney and Tammy Moorer for making Tajana vanish. Prosecutors quickly slapped them with snatching her, even without a body turning up anywhere. The state threw homicide charges at them too. Yet the nightmare wasn't over. The girl was still missing in action, and that couple kept their leash shut. Today, Sydney and Tammy sit locked up for wiping 20-year-old Heather off the map. You did feel, but honestly, it just feels empty. She is still out there somewhere. For over 2 months, the investigation dragged terribly. On top swarmed the pairs last Friday. Dropping any extra details right now might actually wreck the whole investigation instead of helping it. The massive crack in the mystery actually came from the dad digging into his own kid's phone bills. She dialed this one specific digit repeatedly right before her mobile completely went dark forever. Her folks told the network that line traced back to 38-year-old Sydney. Detectives stuck. Those two were messing around closed doors. As the duo sat rotting in jail, investigators kept digging up more dirt. Even with everyone pointing fingers, the authorities basically lacked solid proof to make a homicide stick. Because of that weak evidence, prosecutors totally tossed out the killing accusations against the couple. The abduction rap stayed, though her mom later admitted feeling absolutely crushed when the court thought the allegations. But honestly, it also took a weight off her chest. Dodging a brutal trial meant skipping, although skip at her kid's final moments. Her relatives kept praying that dropping the heaviest penalty might finally push cowardly witness. Followed that chaos, the pair bonded out, heading right back out onto the streets pending their abduction trial. Despite strict gag orders banning them from blabbing about the ongoing probe, they constantly fired off online rants, playing the victim card and screaming they were framed. Sydney then pulled a total crinkle. Framed. He whined about feeling muzzled by the judge while crying about the heavy toll on his own household. Folks treat this like entertainment, but is deadly serious. It was never a joke. The sheer viciousness tearing out of locals is just insane. It absolutely blows my mind how vicious folks get over a stranger judging a situation they are blower crimed we never pulled. Ever since the indictment hit, Sydney complains his entire livelihood vanished overnight, and getting is impossible. As the courts drag things out, he swears he will drain his bank account fighting this whole rap. Taking a plea for a fake crime just means the actual psycho who snatched her is still roaming our street unchecked. That is utterly terrifying. By running his mouth and breaking the judge's gag order, he caught serious heat, lock up for 5 months straight over it. Meanwhile, his wife cried to the press, saying the whole city wanted to burn her at the stake over fraudulent rumors. Time just blowed away. Finally, in 2017, a jury nailed the guy for hiding evidence, adding him a 10 behind bars. Once that wrapped, the massive courtroom showdown over the girl's actual abduction finally kicked off. Cameras swarmed the courthouse as the whole nation tuned in. 6 brutal years had passed since anybody's eyes on her breathing. Following endless witness accounts, a ton of physical proof, and grueling days in court, 2018 brought an answer. The jury hammered Tammy with a guilty verdict. Now, her husband is eating 30 years behind a steel door for planning and pulling off the abduction. It took the panel under 2 hours that Wednesday to totally seal their fate. I am literally pleading for my freedom over a crazy situation. I have absolutely zero connection. The judge slammed her with a 30-year bid per count, running both stretches concurrently. Karma finally caught up when the couple got convicted of snatching the young girl, earning themselves 3 decades in the pen. For the locals, that slam-dunk conviction felt like massive progress in a nightmare that had terrorized the family and gripped the neighborhood for ages. Post-grueling hearings, dozens of witnesses, and tearing apart every clue, the judge finally read the sentence. The entire gallery went dead quiet, choking on this intense cocktail of sweet payback and pure outbreak. Her crew finally watched the law actually work for once. But honestly, watching them get locked up never hurt back. The deepest cuts still bleed out. Whereas Heather, how did it all go down that night? Are they ever going to find her? A guilty verdict looks good on paper, but it absolutely didn't keep her any peace. The agony just cuts deeper when you left in the dark. Even with the judge dropping the hammer, Sidney Moore stuck to his story. Throughout the whole trial, the guy swore up and down he played zero part in making her vanish. He never flipped the script. Once they nailed him with a conviction and handed him the mic, you could cut the tension in that room with a knife. The whole room held their breath, praying he'd drop a crumb of truth about where this girl ended. But the Elvis crew got totally stonewalled. Right there on the stand, Sidney claimed his hands. To her folks, hearing that felt like a punch to the gut after chasing ghosts for all this time. So the gavel comes down, the paperwork gets filed, but the massive black hole of Heather's fate is still sitting right there. If I had something to share, I'd spill it. I'm a parent too, man. I feel their heartbreak, I really do. But I am completely empty-handed here. We step out back. Terry grabs my shoulders, looks me dead in the eye and goes, "Where do we go from?" goes. And I'm like, exactly, the gavel dropped, but we still need Heather back. I kept pleading with the judge, there's gotta be another angle. We need leverage to force these guys to spill their guts. You gotta dangle some kind of carrot to confession. Stepping out of those courthouse doors was pure torture. Knowing our legal playbook was pretty much tapped out completely. Even right now, as we lay out this messed up timeline, Heather's remains are still completely off the radar. Years have faded away, but that wound is still bleeding out for her folks. Waking up in the dark like this turns every single morning into brutal fight. If you cared about this girl, you stuck staring down a giant void that nobody is stepping up to fill. Where is she at? How did it all go wrong? And who's keeping their mouth completely shut? That massive question mark twists the knife even deeper, because without cold hard facts, moving on is just a pipe drinks to keep Heather's name breathing and to shine a spotlight on everyone else who dropped off. The Matt family runs a specific writ every June 30th, her birthday. When that date hits, they hit the pavement taping up missing posters all over town. It's morphed into this heavy annual chi. They cruise down their usual blocks, hitting up storefronts, transit stops, and totally crowded. Brick walls and corkboards get plastered with faces of folks who just ghosted one day, leaving behind zero tracks. To Heather's crew, these posters are way more than just cheap ink and staples. They're screaming at the whole city that every single mugshot belongs to a breathing human, with loved ones stuck in hell waiting. They holding out that eventually, somebody's gonna crack and the dirty truth about Heather Hedgefatals is gonna spill. Her folks are dead set that someone on these streets is holding out. Maybe a bystander caught a bad brait. Maybe a local caught wind of some sketchy chatter. That's exactly why they refuse to let this thing down. They stay loud about it, convinced that just a single tiny thread, one slip up or an anonymous tip could blow the lid off. Debbie insists grinding it out is key, vowing that she's never throwing the towel. It's not just about her own kid anymore. It's for anyone caught in this hellscape. It's morphed in a total crusade for her now. She gets the crushing reality of open your eyes every morning, strapped with straight up grief. This reality has to surface. Debbie always preaches that when things get this dark, you can let the noise fade and let the streets bury their names. Keep the chatter loud, keep their faces fresh, and the investigation keeps breathing. she puts it straight. I've lit through this grinder, and I am pouring everything I've got left into making sure no other family ever feels completely bent like this. She speaks totally level-headed, but you can hear the absolute wreckage and endless pacing in her voice. Debbie sees how quick the universe stops caring, leaving broken families totally stranded on island, where the clock literally stops ticking. When she gets into the guts of missing Heather, she breaks it down like this. Being a mom, you grew that baby in your own body. You rocked them to sleep. You patched up every squaked knee. And now you would literally kill just to get your arms wrapped around them one more time. She drops this heavy truth. Your brain runs endless loops of what you could have tweaked. Words you could have tweaked. You dodged this bullet. Then her voice drops. For my blood and anybody else out there chasing a ghost, staring in that black void to your torture. You can't even protect your own flesh and blood, wrapping it up. She hits back. Folks throw around the word closure. I absolutely despise it. But man, it's exactly what we re-starving for. Terry Heather's souled man is still clinging to a ghost. He admits, man, I constantly catch myself the front porch, just praying she'll stroll right back through that door. Do I honestly think she will? In my gut, hell no. But I ain't ever backing down. When love becomes a trap. Heather Elvis was 20 years old, full of dreams, full of light, full of life. She wanted to do makeup, make people smile, and squeeze every drop out of existence. She had a father who was proud of her, a mother who rocked her to sleep, a sister who looked up to her. She had a future. But one afternoon, a charming older man walked into her workplace, and everything changed. He was married. Everyone warned her. She didn't listen. What started as a flirtatious crush quietly became obsession, manipulation, and ultimately, she wasn't weak. She wasn't foolish. She was human, and humans can be blinded by the intoxicating feeling of being wanted. Here's what Heather's story screams at all of us. Red flags are not suggestions, they are warnings. When someone chooses you in secret but hides you from the world, you are not chosen. You are used. When the people who love you most raise their voices in alarm, listen to them. Your life is worth infinitely more than someone else's toxic attention. Heather never came home. Her mother still wakes up every morning, carrying that unbearable weight. Don't let anyone make you disappear, not from their life, and never from your own.